Hello, my name is Hannah Alcocer. Today I'm going to walk you through the different grain processing methods and what effect proper processing can have on dairy cows in terms of nutrient utilization and milk production. First off, let me explain to you what are grains and what are they used for dairy cattle. Grains are fed as a very high energy feed source to dairy cattle. Some examples include, but are not limited to, barley, corn, sorghum, and wheat. Why do we process grains before feeding them? Well, first, let me explain to you what exactly grain processing is. Grain processing is the method where heat, moisture, time, and mechanics are applied to grain to aid in better digestibility and provide more nutrients to the cow. Whole, unprocessed grains are not advised to be fed to cows. This is due to a very low rate of digestibility. As you can see from this table from a study performed, the whole unprocessed grain had a much lower digestibility than the processed grains. This reasoning can also be seen in this graph. The yellow arrow is pointing out the green line, which depicts the digestibility rate for the whole unprocessed starch source. As you can see, it lies lower than the other lines, which represent the different forms of processing, such as dry rolling, hammer milling, and steam flaked. Grains are also produced in order to improve palatability. Cows are very picky, and if they do not like the taste of the grain, they will refuse to eat them, which will then lead to a decreased amount of nutrients available to be converted to energy in order to produce more milk. Processed grains tend to have a longer shelf life, which is beneficial for the farmer economically. They also provide an ease of handling. It makes the nutrients much easier from a labor standpoint to feed, as they can flow better through bins, augers on farms. What are the different processing methods? Well, there are three main categories of grain processing. The first is non-thermal processing. These include rolling, cracking, and hammering. This group of processing involves the application of great force to the grains. The first picture depicts the rolling method, specifically rolled oats, while this second picture shows cracked corn. The second method is dry processing. This group includes roasting, popping, and micronizing. All of these methods involve an application of heat in order to open up that outer layer of the grain to make them more accessible for ruminal microbes in order for the rumen to have a much easier time fermenting and breaking them down. The picture I've shown here is demonstrating micronized corn. The third and final method of processing is known as wet processing. These include autoclaving, steam flaking, steam pelleting, and toasting. The first image I've shown is of steamed flaked corn, while the second picture right here illustrates a pelleted form of grain. As you notice from these images I've shown, corn was processed three different ways in this slide. Grains can be processed whichever way the farmer finds financially reasonable. So in other words, there is not just one form of processing that works best for each individual starch source. It's really just up to the farmer's preference and what works best for the production facility. So what effect does processing have on dairy cows? Well, when you are processing grain, it is important to do it properly. There are major consequences if you are to under or over process your grains before feeding to cows, which can then severely affect your overall farm efficiency. Over-processed grain products see an increased proportion of fine particles similar to cornmeal or flour. Over-processing can also reduce the palatability of the feeds, which, as I mentioned before, can turn the cows away from intaking those essential nutrients required for optimal energy and milk production. There will be an increased rate of digestion, which may sound beneficial, But if the digestion pattern occurs too quickly in cows, it can add to the increased incidence rate of digestive disorders, specifically rumen acidosis. If feed is digested too rapidly, the ruminal pH will drop drastically due to there being a much faster acid production than acid utilization, which can cause the ruminal pH balance to be skewed lower. Now, the main issue with feeding underprocessed grains is the reduction in starch available for fermentation. If there is a reduced amount of starch available, then there will be an overall dip in energy the cow is able to utilize for milk production. Processing grains correctly will overall increase the starch digestion that occurs in both the rumen and the intestines. This is important because if starch digestion were to occur in solely the rumen, the microbes could use the energy to synthesize protein for the animal to digest and deposit, whereas if starch were digested in the small intestine solely, energy is lost during ruminal fermentation as methane, and the heat of metabolism is avoided. So overall, a combination of both small intestinal and ruminal digestion is most optimal and will overall increase the available energy for milk production. These are my references that I used when putting my presentation together, so if you have any more questions or want to learn any more about this topic, feel free to use these sources. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I taught you a few things.